First of all, I want to thank Ed Center staff. The coordination has been splendid. Food's great, coffee's wonderful, and really helping get this going. It's a novel approach by having a series of seminars, and we're very happy to have you here. One thing I noticed is that it's a pretty sophisticated crowd. I speak quite often, and so we're going to dive deep into the weeds on this. And please feel free to stop me at any time if just chime on in. I really do enjoy this. And so I gave this presentation a long title, and Minimizing Environmental Liability by Analyzing Agency Violation Trends. And I was talking to my staff about this, and you know, Matt, what you're really talking about is strategic compliance. You're helping people focus their compliance efforts by looking at violation histories of the local agencies. So, yeah, but we'll keep the long title. So, what I'm going to try to give you today is one arrow in your quiver to manage your environmental programs. And there's all sorts of ways to do it. You have to do audits. You have to know the regulations. You need to know what agencies apply to you, so on and so forth. But what we're going to do today is, I think, a somewhat novel approach is we're going to really look at the violation settlements from the local agencies. Arya in the back, who's managing the camera, and Kathy, who's also with Alta, help me gather this data. And we're going to talk predominantly about the local air agency, the AQMD, APCD, waste and stormwater regulators, and hazardous waste regulators. Terry talked a bit about EPA. I'm really not going to go there today. I'm thinking more in terms of your day-to-day operations. Who are you going to likely see week in and week out? Depending on the complexity of your facility, you're seeing these regulators every week or once a year. But all of this will apply to you. And then we're going to talk about how to gather data and help you respond to the violation once you get it. If you get it. I'm not saying all you are violating, don't get me wrong. And then we're going to just really touch on, just sprinkle a bit on compliance audit basics. So I'll go about 45 minutes and we'll have some fun. So first let's talk data. I'm a data guy, civil engineer undergrad, and a lot of statistics. And so what we did was we actually compiled data from the AQMD. We sent them a public records request and said, give us your violation data for 2011 and 2010 because we want to compare. I said, we don't have that data. So what we do have, though, is we have just monthly summaries of settlement agreements. So I said, all right, give me 24 reports of your settlements that you've had in 2010, 2011. And so Arya and a couple other folks scoured all the data. It came in 24 different files. And the line items look something like this. Facility X, $100,000 fine for 5 rules within the South Coast Air District that were violated. Arya, am I talking loud enough?
Perfect.
Yes, thank you. And so each fine there per rule will be $20,000 in that instance. So Rule 463 was one rule violated, 20 grand. Solvent rule, 20 grand. So that's how we put the data together. And then Arya did his magic, which you're about to see. So let's just cut to the chase. Anybody want to guess in a typical year how much the South Coast Air Quality Management District settles? Throw out a number.
$1 million.
24 million? Okay. I heard 10 million. You're all pretty good, actually. So in 2010, 14.2 million. In 2011, 5.8 million. I was shocked by how small that second number is. And anybody have hints as to why the numbers dipped dramatically?
Marcus had a moratorium that they weren't going to issue NOVs when the time happened.
Okay. We'll look into those numbers, and I'll tell you if there was really a moratorium. Any other thoughts?
Heading into a political year.
Okay. Reduced staffing. All right.
Big refinery violation in 10, repeated in 11.
Which refinery? Oh, let's not name names. Do you know how big that was?
4 point something million.
Okay. I didn't see that outlier, but that's a big part. But I might have missed it, and I'm going to look at that. In fact, I'm going to know. Refinery outlier. As I said, a sophisticated crowd. I'm a former refiner, I used to work for, anybody who grew up locally heard of Herein Oil Company? Yeah, I worked there for about 7 years, and prior to that, Mother Chevron. And then I've been doing this for about 25 years. And oh yeah, yeah, I used to work for them. It's a ridiculously small environmental world. So let's go on to the next slide. And this is where I'm going to use the pointer a bit, and there is a lot of data. So I'm going to go over these rules a bit, but just take a look and look at the trends here. You see a lot of focus on coatings.
Are those manufacturers or facilities?
Well, coatings, that rule applies to those who sell, market, or manufacture paints, wood finishes, and other finishes.
But the violation goes for facilities and manufacturers?
Both. Okay, and then you've got solvents. So this is sorted by total amount of fines, and that's a huge chunk. And then permits to operate. So those who are violating their existing permit. And reclaim. For those of you not familiar with reclaim, those are large facilities, typically refineries, power plants, aerospace facilities. I'm going to guess there's a couple of reclaim facilities here from the names I heard. Title V are, again, larger facilities that have facility permits. And then anybody here have underground tanks? Okay, so be careful with Rule 461 because there's a lot of citations given there. They're not particularly large. Any contractors here are maybe pulling asbestos? Okay, that typically won't involve the manufacturers, but some of the schools will want to be careful with all the construction projects associated with that. Someone, Rule 301, probably didn't pay their fees, and then again, solvents. So I'll ask my third question. What trend do you see in these? There's all sorts of trends, but what trends do you see in these violations?
Decline in the housing.
Okay. And why do you say that?
Agriculture, architectural coatings dropped and sort of probably in line with the tailing out of the
Very good
housing
point.
industry.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Very for recovery? Yeah. There's a lot of inspectors for service stations and petroleum storage. Well, my takeaway from all this was, and I've worked with hundreds of inspectors, was just about every one of these violations is pretty easy to spot. So if you've violated your permit condition, it's right there in black and white. If you don't have your solvent monitoring records, well, it's going to be very obvious to the inspector. So use this as a guide. If any of these rules apply to you, is there anybody in this room who none of these rules apply to? Okay. Use this as a guide, and when you're doing, running your environmental management systems. Let's see what. I don't have a whiteboard, so can I have a volunteer to write down a number? Who wants to volunteer to write down a number? No volunteers? Thank you, sir. What's your name?
Frank.
Frank. I caught him with his mouth full. Sorry. All right. I neglected to add this up. So this is top 9. Everyone does a top 10. We did a top 9 to be different. This is 10.9 million, Frank. And there are 946 violation counts. So one of the hypotheses was that there's a moratorium. They were giving out fewer NOVs, fewer violation counts. So you'd expect in 2011 it would go down, right? All right. And then this percent of the total, that 10.9, here's the third number for you, Frank, was 77%. So of all the violations, that was 10.9 million. Of all the violations, it's about 77% of the total. Now let's have a little fun with graphics, because this is a lot of information on one slide. If you just want to look at the data from the fine values, this is a nice simple one. So again, going from highest total fine value for the year going down, again, solvents. It's just a different way of presenting it. And then from the violation count. And I want to emphasize here, this is only the South Coast Air Quality Management District. And now this is the chart that I've shown this presentation 2 separate occasions, a slightly different variation. And everyone always comes to me and says, Matt, send me the putting it together slide, because I want to show it to other management personnel in the company to tell them I need to work on some programs. This has everything in one shot. And you can explain what rules they are. You can use that first slide. But I've got about half a dozen people say, send me that slide only. It's the only one I want. I'm going to show it to my manager because we want to work on some programs that were captured by me. So let's move on to 2010, break it down a bit. I'm not going to go over all the rules again, but I would like to just point out some rules that are new to this list. And I think the trends are there. You know, we didn't have the big coding numbers at about 5 million before. Reclaims at the top of this one. Well, there's just a new one, nuisance, Rule 402. Brief story, when I was a refiner in the early to mid 90s, I signed a notice of violation for Rule 402. It was an odor complaint. You have so many complaints that are confirmed, they have to give you a Rule 402 violation. And then I proudly told my boss, I got this inspector out of here in a half hour, here's the violation, we knew we were gonna get it. She immediately said, Matt, have a seat. And we immediately called our attorney, a $700 an hour attorney, and I was chastised for a half hour for my sake to not sign Rule 402 nuisance violations. Because they're the most likely to go criminal. She said, always have the president sign those. And in fact, you should have a corporate policy as to who can sign violations, the tickets that you get, and I'll show you a snapshot of one. So just keep that in mind. So Frank, we had the total numbers before of 10 million. Now we have, when you add all this, we're at 4 million, 4.06, so 4.1. And this number was 890. Okay, this total number is about 70%. So Frank, what was the count from 2010? Total number?
Total number of violations is 946.
So 947 versus 890, 70 versus 77%. They issued about the same number of tickets. Moratorium, my point.
In terms of moratorium, if they're not prosecuted, in terms of.
There you go. That is really the difference. And I want to give the AQMB credit. I was sort of teasing them for the past 10 minutes. And I invited a couple AQMB inspectors here. I would have loved to have had them, but they were just busy. And the settlement amount per NOV on average for the top 9 violations was $6,557.